it establishes, hey, I'm trying to find Sydney Sweeney. Like, where is she?
Not Sydney Sweeney.
Oh
We're
my
all
God,
trying to find Sydney Sweeney.
Sydney Sweeney. I said that even less.
Prescott.
Sydney Prescott. Dang.
Dino has Sydney Sweeney on the brain.
No, it's just the only Sydney name I know, so I feel like that's why. But
It's okay, we all do, bud.
You don't have to.
You don't have to apologize.
It's a safe space, me and Alon. We're not. You don't have to convince us.
I finally
Watched.
I finally
Watched. I
finally
watched. I
finally
watched.
I finally
Watched.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of I Finally Watched. This is David.
And this is Alon, and we finally watched Scream 3. And today we're joined by, once again, thrice again, by Dino and Ginny Favara, our annual Scream companions.
yes.
Oh yeah, we did Scream.
But yeah, we just finished. We watched Scream 3. I've literally never seen any of the Screams until hanging out with Alon. So
Yeah.
all of these have been truly us.
It's been 3 years now.
Yeah, every
Nice.
year we're watching these
It's
movies.
tradition.
It is now, I think there's a rule, right? If it happens 3 times, now it is tradition.
True.
Yes.
Exactly.
If we break it, a curse will befallen upon our families for
Oh.
generations to come.
Gosh.
Well, we only have 2 more years, right?
No, 4.
What?
No, 3.
Three.
3 more.
Well,
years.
until they come out with another one.
True.
Oh, okay.
Scream 7. Perfect. And then we have to watch all of the entire show. We have to
Oh
watch
yeah, there's a
so.
TV show. Did you know there's a Scream show, David?
Who's in it?
No one we know, no one famous. It was produced by MTV, and it was back in like 2015. And I think no one liked it.
Wow.
Although it was ranked number 4.
It
5?
was ranked. Yeah, Dino and I looked this up because we wanted to see how well Scream 3 was ranked in the entirety of the Scream franchise. And it was bottom of the barrel, trash Rotten Tomato rating. And the TV show actually beat it by 2 spots up. So
That's crazy.
That is wild.
Because I actually liked Scream 3.
Yeah,
Whoa,
I think
spoilers, Jenny.
I think I almost liked this more than 2.
Really?
I rewatched 2 right before we watched 1. Right before we watched 3. And I was thinking to myself, how are they going to get more meta in 3? Because they get real meta in 2.
Yeah.
And obviously, and I should have seen this coming, is that they just, they talk about making the happenstances in Scream 1 into a movie, and they show bits and pieces of the movie in Scream 2. And of course, I should have known that in Scream 3, we would be like on set of the filming of the final chapter of that fictional movie's trilogy. You can keep up with that.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah. But I think that was really cool. Like, that was a really cool way to kind of like make this into something more than what it is. It's like bring us to the set in which this is being shot on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I also thought, something that stood out to me that I really enjoyed about it was it could have seen maybe as like a pull it out of the hat sort of moment, but having was it Randy as the character?
Yeah,
come back as like a video recording of, if I don't make it, here's what you need to know about a third one. Yeah. I did really like that because I didn't realize how much I liked him doing that in the first and second movie.
Oh yeah,
the third, where he basically explains and tells the audience this is what's going to happen.
And of course, we get that video by the introduction of his sister, who we've never seen before, but I guess she was like in middle school when the first 2 were taken, and now she's old enough. One of my favorite lines in the whole movie is from her. She jump scares the crew by opening up like a portable, and she's like, "Don't shoot me! I'm only 17."
Yeah.
Makes sense.
And then we all screamed a little because she's from Princess Diaries. The actor.
So Jamie Kennedy, who plays Randy, I guess there was like a lot of blowback when he was killed in the second one. So they thought about writing basically that he secretly survived in the second one so that they could bring him back, but they just thought that that was a little bit like too far. So
Yeah.
that's why they came up with the video idea, which I think works better. There is just like, there's a lot with this movie where it feels like that. So it was written very quickly and it kind of feels that way, that like there were a lot of ideas thrown out. And one of the major things, and when you watch these movies, it's like what you're kind of looking for is like, you're trying to figure out who the killer is. And so many people, they kind of threw darts at so many people as far as like who could be the killer. But I guess part of the movie that they cut out the end was that Angelina that plays Sydney is supposed to be the second killer.
She was
That's what
supposed to?
that's what I was thinking. Like, I was like, dude, she has to be the accomplice here.
Because she acts so weird throughout the whole movie.
And her
Yeah.
death was so off screen in a way. Like, there was no real guarantee that she was dead other than her getting dragged away.
Yeah, I don't think you actually see her get stabbed, right?
You
You
do, but you also see
also-
Billy get stabbed in the first one.
Right.
So very quickly, the Scream franchise has established that means nothing.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
You can see a character get stabbed on screen, and it still possibly means they're alive. So
Mhm.
that doesn't mean shit.
Literally.
Throwing darts is kind of the perfect analogy at this, because it almost feels like the writers writing this movie didn't even know who to make, like who
No.
they would make is the killer.
Yeah.
And then at the final scene where everyone kind of gets picked off at the end, they're like, well, I guess we'll just
Mhm.
the ending, even though it's cool, the whole I'm your half brother, it seemed just a little bit shoehorned in.
Well, and the point I was making with the Angelina thing is that, like, in a lot of these movies, there's two killers, so that when you go, you can rewatch it and say, like, all right, well, who did what? Because like in the first one, Billy is like in the police station, so who does this? Who did this kill? And someone pointed out that, like, in this one, it's like near impossible for Roman to have like done all these killings on his own.
Mhm.
And then also, like, there's a certain point where Sydney like throws him off like the second story of the set. Like, how did he get back up there? In reality, it's supposed to be because both of them were in there. So like, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think, having said that, like that, it would have been cool to have her. That I feel like they made it so obvious that she was the suspect with the way she acted,
Yeah.
that
That's
if it was revealed it was her, I guess it would have been cool, because on the other side, Roman being the killer, there's like no evidence of that throughout the entire movie until the
Right.
very end, and you're just like, oh hey, this is the killer that you've like never even really seen that much. He's been in like 2 scenes.
It would be insane if Roman comes out, it's like, hey, I'm the killer and your half brother, and then Angeline comes out and says, I'm also the other killer and your half sister. It's just like,
That would have been
Too
wild,
much.
actually.
Yeah.
And your mom reincarnated. No, but yeah,
That-
I agree. It was like I kind of felt a pang of sadness when I figured out there wasn't a second killer. Like, I really wanted, it sounds silly, but I really wanted there to be that second one, because now it doesn't feel like I should rewatch Scream 3. Kind of like what you said, David. It's like having that second killer makes the rewatch so much more enjoyable, because it gives you something to do, and you're like, oh, how did they? Because literally, actually, when I showed up, when Alon, you were watching Scream 2,
yeah.
we literally started talking. I was like, okay, like I forget how did this person kill with this, like at this scene in the van? Who was that?
Yeah, it was like this specific kill with the sorority girl, but then the mom was already downstairs on the payphone.
Right.
Yeah, things like that. It's like, oh, then it had to be the other one. The cool thing about Scream 2 also is that the mom being present, but us not knowing it was her,
Mm-hmm.
and then rewatching it, knowing it's her now, it gives a new meaning to like everything she says. And there's this one time where Courtney Cox runs out, and this is after Dewey has been stabbed, and she runs into the mom, and she's like, call 911, call 911. Cotton is the killer. and the surprise look on the mom's face of like Cotton, and you're thinking, oh, it's a natural reaction because it's like, oh my god, Cotton's the killer, but
Right.
it's a surprise look on her face because she's like, no, he's not. I am, and I know Mikey is. Like, why would you think Cotton is? So
Right.
it just gives like a double meaning to everything.
So I think we can start from the top. I actually really like the opening with Cotton in this movie. I guess it was Liev Schreiber's idea to be killed off because he's probably like, I don't need to be in like 7 of these. And I like that it wasn't like the way they use like the voice recording thing where he can like the voice changing thing. I didn't want this to be some sort of, and it happens a little bit in the movie, some sort of like, oh, other people get blamed for the murders and the cops are trying to figure it out. Like that happened a little bit with Roman, but it worked itself out very quickly. So I kind of expected that to be what they were going to do. Like Cotton was going to get pinned for another murder. And I was like, oh, great. It's a repeat of one. So when he goes in there and his girlfriend is like accusing him of like pretending to kill him, and you find out that they have these like kinky fantasies where he does pretend to be a killer, but this one time he's like taking it too far, she thinks.
Mm-hmm.
Then when the killer pops out, it's like, oh, holy shit. Like that was a
Yeah.
cool bit.
Especially when on the phone, he's like, oh, your girlfriend is in the shower. And the first thing he does is immediately check the shower.
Yeah.
And it's still steamy, right? It's still steaming in there.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, okay, she just took a shower. So he knows that it might be true. And then he sees the stab marks in the door. And that's when he's like, let me grab a golf club. And shit goes down. I think that's cool. I think the only reason that the voice changer works and doesn't come off as like this super cheap thing that like exonerates everyone is that one of the voices that the audience think that the killer is mimicking is actually the killer's own voice.
Yes.
So in the beginning, right? In the beginning, when that girl is called into the studio by Roman, it was actually Roman setting her up.
Right. And it wasn't actually a voice changer. Because I was thinking about that too when it was all over. I was like, oh, so he didn't even have to use a voice changer. He used the voice changer to go into the scream, like the killer voice, the Ghostface voice.
Right. The thing too, it's like when Patrick Dempsey interrogates him and he's like, her roommate knew that she was going to go meet you, and the security guard who saw her there said she was going to go meet you. And he's like, I never told her that I was going to meet her anywhere. It was like we were a character in that moment. Like the audience was the character in that moment, thinking like, yeah, stupid Detective Kincaid. He didn't do it because the killer we know has a voice changer.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't, and he actually did it. So it was just kind of funny how it flipped the script on us.
Yeah.
Well, one thing I thought was kind of funny about the beginning too. So Cotton throws a bookcase on Ghostface, and he somehow like hits Cotton, gets the bookcase off of him with all the books, gets up immediately as if nothing happened, and then kills Cotton. Which is just like, I like the, and I don't know if I made this comment last time, but like the Scooby-Doo element of these movies, this is like Scooby-Doo for adults is all these movies are. It's like trying to figure out who's in the mask, except like you're actually going to die in these movies.
It's going to be a bloody death.
Yeah, I remember seeing that too and being like, that can't be a girl who just casually kicks off a bookcase. And because what happens is,
What, you don't think a girl can do that?
well, okay, I'm not. I think there are some.
Have
girls,
you seen Liev Schreiber? I mean, come on.
That is true. But I think it's crazy because he kicks off the bookcase so hard that Lee Schreiber like
it flips him. It flips him
back
over the desk. Exactly. Yeah.
Like, okay. That is a really good analogy, though, David. The Scooby-Doo for adults. That's really funny.
Well, I think I just was like watching it today. It's like that's the whole point. Well, Scooby-Doo, that's not really the whole point. The whole point is either to just watch it as a kid or to get high as a a teen or an adult and watch Scooby-Doo. But like I it's just like the whole point of these movies, and I think the reason that some people maybe have a problem with like the later versions of this is that you're trying to figure out who this is, and I don't think the movie does a great job of giving you the ability to do that.
Yeah.
I think that's my only problem with this one.
I
Like
think
it's
I
it's
think
a
the
lot
other
of
two do.
yeah, this one's well, I don't know. I think the first one does, but then the second one, I think you can kind of figure out it's Timothy Oliphant, maybe, but there's no way that you can figure out that other reporter.
No, for sure. But with the first two, by the way, do you think that's why Matthew Lillard was hired to be Shaggy in this live action Scooby Doo because of this?
This is
Huh?
basically Scooby Doo. It should work. here.
Like zoinks! That was pretty good. All right.
Was it?
Was it? I don't know. I don't know. I'm not too sure now. I'm not confident. Well, the thing is too, it's like when watching these Halloween, Freddy Krueger, Jason, you always think, oh, it has to be one killer and one killer only. And so Scream immediately flips it on the head when you said, oh no, it was these two guys, you just never saw them at the same time. So the endless possibilities. I can't wait till we get to like a Scream movie where it's like five dudes who all get together and do this, you know?
That would be really interesting.
5, yeah. And it's like a fraternity.
Yeah,
Or
exactly.
Or if it's like a cult, I feel like it would be really interesting if it was like a community, like if they move into a new neighborhood or something, and it's everyone's in on it and everyone's, I don't know, something interesting like that. But yeah, I do agree on the aspect of like, I do feel like in Scream 2 and Scream 1, there was enough, like especially looking back, you see that they insinuate this could be a person. And they're basically like putting all, it's like almost like they're taking all of the characters and putting them out in front of you and saying, here's all these people and here's why their motives would match up to why they would do it.
It's like a game of Clue. It's like, is it Gale Weathers with the hammer in the basement,
Right.
like that sort of thing.
This one kind of comes out of nowhere and he's like, by the way, it's Roman, who you haven't really seen and who was also stabbed an hour ago. Like,
well, and the one thing that I think does kind of work with that is the video from Randy where he's like, all the rules go out the window. You're going to meet new characters that you've never known about, things you thought you knew. So you thought you knew how Sydney's mom was killed. You're going to find out that wasn't true. So I do think the movie at least thought about like, hey, does this make sense?
Right. That's funny.
It kept saying, like, it kept really making a point how old Roman was. He's like, man, a director with his biggest flop before the age of 30. And then like 2, nights later, they're celebrating his 30th birthday. So they're really making a point to be like, this dude is 30 years old.
So old.
Yeah, so
30
old.
is so old.
So old. They're making a point of like, okay, this guy's 30 years old and Sydney is a little bit younger. So everything kind of lines up if you want to look in it more. And then like the killer leaves behind a picture of her mother young at the studio backlots, right? That's another huge plot point that the detectives are looking at. So it's like, what does that mean? Who has like access to her past and stuff? And then I like how the movie naturally, where we would go too, is pinning it on Milton, the Hollywood producer, who has a diving board attached to his
Yeah.
like 17th story window office.
It's a metaphor.
Yeah.
I think taking it back a little bit to the beginning. So we see Sydney, she's basically hiding out in the middle of nowhere. Then we go to Gail giving a speech on journalism and like the audience members are making fun of her. And then we get taken to the movie set. I really love, so they had to rebuild all the sets for that one scene where she gets chased around there. But that's like my favorite part. I was almost like, man, I wish you'd kind of almost ended there with like that being like where the final, if he had been like, let's
Mm.
take it back to where it all started,
Yeah,
Sydney.
that was cool.
You know what would be so cool, and I was kind of hoping that they were going to go do this, and they did not, is that they would have Drew Barrymore's house
Oh,
on set from the first one, and then it would be putting Sydney in the same space as Drew Barrymore, which I feel like out of all the movies out of the Scream franchise, that scene is the most iconic.
Hmm.
But Sydney is nowhere near that scene, right? But putting her in that same set as Drew, I thought that would have been really cool. And like what a perfect opportunity to like logically do that for in that moment. But that doesn't happen.
connect all the dots. Yeah.
So we go on the set, we meet all the characters, Parker Posey, and this is great. And it's also like they hired people that were like well enough known to where you're like that could be it. Although so like Emily Mortimer, who plays Angelina, I guess this was like her first like movie role, and she had to like get special like she had to get a work visa. So I guess
She's
they flew
English, right?
Yeah, so they flew her here. They realized she didn't have a work visa, so then I guess they had to fly her to Canada to get a work visa to then come back. But like that was kind of like a pretty early role for her. But seeing her now, I'm like, I know exactly who that is. So that was cool, right? And then you have like Jenny McCarthy. The guy who plays the cop at first was like, is that fucking Brad? Like from far off, I was like, is that like Brad Pitt playing their role? Because it was funny, like having that person as Dewey.
Him. Yeah.
Up close, it doesn't look anything like it, but like at first glance from far off, I was like, wait, who do they have doing this? Because like, I think at this time,
it would have been hilarious if it was like Luke Wilson or Owen Wilson.
Owen Wilson.
Because they're related to David Arquette.
Are they? No, they're not. No, because Luke Wilson was in Scream 2.
Who is he?
He was the actor that
he was in Stab.
He was in Stab.
Yeah. Okay.
So it would have been funny if it was Owen Wilson, right? Okay.
Yeah, that would be funny.
That would have been funny.
Another Wilson.
So this all takes us to we have this like dream sequence with Sydney and a jump scare with Ghostface. But I think the next kind of scene is the Jenny McCarthy scene where she goes to the studio and she thinks she's talking with Roman, which I guess she might actually be.
She is talking with Roman, and which is like that's the most insane part of it.
Yeah, sorry to cut you off. Yeah.
No, go ahead, Jenny.
No, that's like what twisted your mind was like. It was Roman, but not really Roman, but it is Roman.
Exactly. Well, that's crazy too, because I forgot about that scene that they had where she's talking on the phone with him and like they're reading the script together and his voice goes from Roman to Ghostface on the phone, but it's just Roman.
Yeah. So the Roman voice was real.
Yeah, and then he changed it to the Ghostface voice. Which, correct me if I'm wrong, David, but I think that's the same guy, like the famous Ghostface voice. The same guy throughout all movies, right?
Yeah. When this death happened too, and you and I talked about this, I felt this movie was a lot less bloody. And then
it was definitely funnier. Like there were more gags in this movie,
Well, so reading up on it, and I told you, I was like, I almost wonder if this had to do with Columbine. And apparently they made a lot of changes because of that. They were thinking about bringing Matthew Lillard back and having him like plan murders at high schools. And they're like, all right, we can't fucking do that anymore.
Yeah.
And then they had to make a lot of cuts with the MPAA because around this time they're like, do violent movies and video games cause kids to do these things. I think also one of the reasons they cut the second killer is because having two people going around murdering people, there were a lot of changes made because of that. But when I said less bloody, I was reading that there was actually less fake blood used in this movie. So I guess there were 10 gallons used in this. There were 30 used in the second and 50 used in the first.
Oh my gosh.
So like a substantial amount less of fake blood.
It just progressively got less. And the rating also got less. So maybe that's some sort of correlation.
By now it's probably 0 because it's all like CGI blood.
Or maybe they use real blood now.
Oh, Frank.
Ooh. Horse blood.
Something
Oh,
that
no.
was intriguing to me, though, like upon reflecting on it, is I feel like with, I don't know, maybe it's just in the first movie, they're just psychotic killers and they're just killing because whatever. But I felt like in Scream 2, all the kills seemingly were connected to Sydney and like led up to Sydney. And especially with like the first, with Cotton being killed, it's like it establishes, hey, I'm trying to find Sydney Sweeney. Like, where is she?
Not Sydney Sweeney.
Oh
We're
my
all
God.
trying to find Sydney Sweeney.
Where's Sydney Sweeney? I said that even less.
Prescott.
Sydney Prescott. Dang.
Dino has Sydney Sweeney on the brain.
No, it's just the only Sydney name I know, so I feel like that's why. But
It's okay,
so,
we all do, bud. We all
Yeah,
do.
you don't. Yeah, you don't have to. I
You
mean,
don't have to apologize.
it's
for
a
that.
safe space, me and Alon. We're not. You don't have to convince
Prescott.
us.
Sydney Prescott, he's trying to find her, and then the rest of the murders like have nothing to do with that.
Well, even more
Yeah, I
so
mean-
on that. Even more to your point is like the whole first 3 kills were the killer was systematically killing due to the script, right?
Right.
And then that was kind of just thrown out the window when the fucking house blew up.
Yeah,
It's
Well,
like, who cares now?
Well, there were 3 different versions of the script, so they're like, which version did the killer read?
So it could have been Parker Posey, the guy or the girl, and it was just dependent on who went back into the house to read the final facts.
yeah.
Basically.
Yeah.
That was the funniest thing too. Where he
Oh.
lights the ladder and lighter, and he's like, the person who dies is the one who smells the gas, and I think they actually must have blown up that house.
You think so?
That
Maybe
looked
it-
like a
maybe it was a
real explosion.
I mean, they killed that guy for
No,
sure.
no, they didn't kill the guy, but they. I mean, the way they blew up the house, I don't know. It looked like they blew up a fucking house.
Have you seen Matt Kiesler since this? Because I've never even heard
That's
of him.
true. I've never seen him since this. So
He sacrificed his life
For this movie.
He's
for
method.
this movie.
he's
the worst way.
method.
So
What a way to go!
what I want to talk about next is, so they take Roman away, and they think that he might have done it because of the voice, and like the roommate said that, you know, she heard Roman invited her. And then we get Sydney at home again, and Ghostface calls her. Later on in the movie, they're like, how could anyone have gotten your number? And like, Dewey, do you have her number saved? He's like, yeah. The only people that have seen it are Jennifer, Parker Posey, and the detective. And that like is never explained later how Roman got a hold of her.
I wonder if we go back and watch it, which we probably won't. But if we go back and watch it, if there is a moment that does explain that, I'm curious to see.
I doubt it.
Because isn't part of the explanation is like he's supposed to have her number because when she's on the call, she realizes she accidentally pressed like the home phone button instead of work phone.
She realizes she got called at her home number. So that's when she knows that something was up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy too. I also love like she has a dog, right?
Mhm.
And then she goes into her house, she puts on the alarm, and then she has 3 like padlocks to lock her door. And then at the end of the movie that kind of changes for her. But her whole crisis thing is that now she's decided to dedicate her life to helping other women in crisis. I think that's kind of cool for her character.
Yeah. I think it's cool too that the movie showed how she's taking security seriously, because I think I didn't like that about the second movie, how she just goes to college after all this trauma. I mean, we don't know what happens in between, but I'm like, if someone goes through all those killings and you yourself was being attacked or like being sought after, like how do you just go to college right after that?
It's a fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, I'm gonna move out in the middle of
Yeah.
California and
It takes
get
the third-
security.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's this
Literally.
I don't think anyone here besides me have seen the new Halloween remakes.
No.
There's a moment in the first one where, now understanding that Jamie Lee Curtis who has survived Michael Myers like 6 times at this point, right?
Mhm.
And so when you finally see her in the remake, she's a lot older. She has learned jujitsu. She has like 50 guns hiding around in her house. She has trapdoors. She has tripwires. She has like a perimeter set. And it's like that's the kind of mentality that one would sympathize with if you've been attacked by Michael Myers like 50 times in your life.
Mhm.
Right.
So for Sydney Sweeney, damn it, Dino, you're doing it now.
It's
For-
so stupid.
for Sydney Prescott, you would imagine the exact same thing. It's like every movie we see now, now she doesn't go anywhere without a gun. Now she, so, and of course this movie ends differently than what we would expect 4 or 5 or 6 to be. But even like, what's his face? The guy who dies, who shows up, Randy, right? Even like Randy says, it's like, if this is a true trilogy, then it's a closing of a chapter, whether the main character, Sydney, dies or not. It's still a closing of a chapter. And it just makes me more curious into being like, okay, they ended this pretty well. What the hell is 4 even about?
Yeah.
It's 10 years later, and they're like, hey, money. That's what it's about. That's what it's about. I mean, we'll find out next year. Also, Sydney Sweeney would be a perfect like opening to like a reboot of this, like playing the Drew
True.
Barrymore role.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That'd be good.
That is actually a good point.
That would be cool.
So the next scene we get, Gail goes over to Parker Posey's house, and she's like, hey, Roman's released. And she says the calls were made from an untraceable cloned cell phone. I was like, I have no idea what that means. That just sounds like 2000 bullshit that like no one understood. And they're just like, all right, that checks out.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
Speaking of 2000 bullshit, at the end where she star 69s him, and
Yeah.
and I'm like, wow, that's like
It's
a
old school.
relic of its time.
Yeah.
Actually, I loved that though, because he's calling her to reveal her location, and she
Gets it first.
Uno reverse cards him and stabs him. So
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
actually watched the alternate ending too, and the alternate ending is like more from her perspective. I really like what they went with in the final cut, where that last bit is kind of from his perspective, and he starts to kind of freak out. You don't even see her face doing any of the stuff. You just see her hands grabbing the ice pick, calling star 69, and it kind of does set her up as honestly like this badass of like, I know how to freaking fight back in this situation. I thought that was a really cool way to end that. I don't know, that whole death sequence.
And the only difference too, David, in the alternate ending is Patrick Dempsey never comes in with a gun. So when David Arquette blows the fuse by sticking the metal into the socket, the blackout is what gives her time to escape and hide behind the bar.
because the blackout was so confusing. I was like, what does that solve? Now it just makes it harder to find them when you go in there.
I have an idea, and I'm going to electrocute myself.
I do that too
That was
sometimes.
weird.
Get me out of this fucking franchise. I'm going to kill myself.
'Cause I guess it was unclear if Patrick Dempsey was going to make it or not at the end of this, like whether he was going to live or die. So we next go to Dewey tells the other security guard to check the perimeter, and then we get so Patrick Warburton is playing the guy.
Kronk.
Incredible.
I have so many alternate castings at the end of this that I'm gonna have to run through. But do you know who they considered to play that role?
The Patrick Warburton role?
Bert butchered that name. Yeah,
Patrick Warburton role?
Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Whoa, that's amazing.
Yeah,
Cold.
would have been great. So, and then right after he's killed, there's like a ton of like huge set pieces in this movie of like multiple murders, which is kind of a little bit different from what I remember. Like when from the other one. So like when we get to the end of this movie, I was like, oh, there's 45 minutes left, and they're all going to this party. I was like, this seems like a cool final location, but it's like there's way too much time. And then it's just kept going, and
It
then
kept
Sydney
going.
gets called.
Yeah.
So I guess Nev Campbell had it in her contract that she only had to work like 3 weeks on this movie. And so like she's barely in it.
That's why it felt like Gale Weathers was way more the main character than Sydney Prescott.
Yeah, she's not in it that much. And then yeah, the blowing up of the house, Tom dies, and then they all fall down the hill. And when Angelina like comes out of a weird spot, I already thought it was weird because you don't see her falling down the hill.
Yeah.
So I was like,
Yeah.
what to me it was like she knew it was about to happen, so she was like, well, I'm not gonna fall down a hill. I'll just like jump in the pool or something.
Well, hold on. Before we get to the Angelina coming out of a weird spot, you can't forget that Ghostface is like 2 seconds away from killing Gale Weathers, and then Dewey shoots him, but then it's revealed later on that he was wearing a bulletproof vest, right?
Always.
Always. And Ghostface rolls under the car, and then that's when we see Parker Posey walk up. And then from the other side, that's when we see Angelina walk up. So it could have been like Ghostface could have been Angelina, rolled under the car, ran around, and then came in from that side. I think is what the movie wanted us to think happened.
Because that's what I thought happened.
Well, you also could have thought it was Parker Posey.
Right.
I did. I thought it was Parker Posey for a while.
Too.
Well, because also Parker Posey was the first one to run into the building or run into the house after Patrick is stabbed. It's like the first person. There's like that suspense sequence where Dewey's like, "Hello, anyone?" And then Parker Posey jumps in, and I'm just like, I had this mentality throughout the whole first half. Because what we did was we all wrote down names at the very beginning, like halfway through. We're like, okay, who do we think are the two killers? And I thought her, because I just noticed every single time someone died, she was like the first one to show up.
Even towards the end when Roman looked dead, she was right there behind a curtain.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that actually made me think. So you think she is it until after this scene. They go to the studio. So Sydney shows up because the detective's like, I want to talk to her. I'm going to get you for obstruction, which is like, you're not going to get him for anything. And then he calls Sydney and she just shows up at the police station. And then they decide to go down to the studio. And Parker Posey follows Gale around. And that's when Sydney is attacked. So, at the very least, she can't be the only killer. Like she could be one of them.
When you could still think it's two, it still has a lot of possibilities.
Yeah, because no one's safe. It's also the same as like if you see a death or if you see someone exonerated, then like that doesn't mean anything.
Yeah. So when they're at the studio and she gets chased by the ghost face around the set of her house, it's so cool how they utilized it, right? So she's sitting in her bedroom. It's so freaking cool. I can't get over it. She's sitting in her bedroom and she's remembering like when Billy snuck in her room and like that whole conversation and happening, right? She hears a noise. She goes out. She looks out the window and then the door, I think, slams behind her. And she pulls the same move that she did in the first movie where she opens the closet door to block her bedroom door from opening.
I was like, do the thing with the doors.
and I really thought that the killer was going to come out of the closet door.
Yeah. I was thinking that too, actually, whenever she was opening it up, I was like, the closet door's in frame. It's a perfect opportunity.
Not only is it in frame, but the way they do it too. Like in the beginning too, when Cotton was in his car, the way they framed it is they gave so much space to his right that you totally expected a ghost face to pop up in the back seat, right?
Yeah.
But the way they frame the doors and the way they like light it so that it's like really dark and you can't really see anything back there.
Mm-hmm.
But then he comes through the window and then they do the whole roundabout. But how the coolest part of that scene is when she comes out of the second story, realizes there's no floor there, right? Ghostface does the same thing, and she's waiting for him, grabs him by the collar, and throws him
Yeah,
off.
that was
So
amazing. I think we all applauded.
We all cheered.
Yeah. But he had a soft landing, so
Yeah,
it was
man.
also great.
So we already talked about Randy, his video,
Yeah.
and at the same time, Sydney's being attacked, which I like is my favorite part of it. Her walking through the houses. She's then like gets thrown out, and like the detective comes in, and I think at this point they're like really want you to think it's the detective. They
Yeah.
really want you to think it's Angelina. Like those are kind of the two primary suspects.
Well, it worked because we did.
Yeah.
I thought for sure the detective. I mean, I guess like later when watching it unfold, the closer it got to the ending, the more obvious it seemed. So I was like, okay, so maybe it's
It
not the
seems
detective.
super obvious when there was that moment where he has the gun and she pulls the gun and he tells her to put the gun down. He does this creepy ass smile.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But if you watch it thinking he's not the killer, the smile he does is the realization that, oh, she thinks I'm the killer, and I need to diffuse this situation by putting my gun away.
Mm.
Yeah.
So there were so many times where I was like, oh, this is probably the killer, and then the movie kept going and making it more obvious. So like towards the end, as Sydney is talking, is just waiting in the office, all the cops outside are like, oh, where's Detective Kincaid? I don't know. I haven't seen him all day. He's disappeared. What could he be doing? I was like, all right, guys. It's like, what do we...
Also, he has all these like playbills and movie posters all around his office. Like he's a big cinephile.
Mhm.
And it's like, well, who did we know that was a big cinephile last movie? Oh, Mikey, who also happened to be the killer? Like, yeah.
Right.
But then also, like, he has the Sydney file that he's not supposed to.
Mhm.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
I will
So-
say, like, in that whole moment, I was like, especially when it was just them two in the office and he was kind of like talking, and they definitely like underlaid the music to make it sound more sinister than the conversation might have actually been.
He gets right up in her face and
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like my story.
But I
That's
remember just being like,
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
that's right, Jenny. Sorry, Dino, just real
Oh,
quick. Where she's like, "What's your favorite movie?" And he's like, "My life."
and he says it so creepily of like, that's my favorite. You're
Yeah.
like, I don't know. It was weird.
right.
I think if you watch it back now, you're just like, oh, they're just like flirting with each other and they're super cringe about it. You know what I mean? Because he's like kind of in love with her. It seems like he has an infatuation with her. And the other cop, who I guess the other cop at one point was considered for the killer.
I could see that.
Yeah, I mean, there were so many. So one cool part about this is that Scott Foley, who plays the killer, you know, they don't tell people that they're the killer until later on. And I guess like someone working on the movie, like a makeup person or whatever, is just like, do you know? He's like, no, what? I'm like, you're the killer. And he's like, oh, sweet. And like, he's like, you know, if you get brought onto a Scream movie, you want to be the killer.
course.
So I think Parker Posey could have had a crazy turn as the killer. Like I've seen her do parts like that.
Yeah.
So that like I wanted that, but I mean she was great in the role she played anyway.
That whole thing, and we kind of skipped over it, but the whole thing where they made Parker Posey play Gale, but then Dewey is her advisor on how Gale would act, is such a douchebag thing for Dewey to do, especially when you have that scene where she overhears them talking about her and they're like, yeah, she's a real bitch sometimes, but good heart. It's like, no, I don't care. I'd be super pissed about that whole thing.
We haven't even brought up Princess Leia and the like one of the lines. So apparently she helped rewrite some of her lines, but I was up for Princess Leia. Who gets it? The one that sleeps with George Lucas is like so funny, and like the fact that she was willing to do it. I told Alon later on, like when I had like 20 minutes left in the movie, I was like, "Is fucking Princess Leia gonna be the murderer?"
That'd be insane. But you know, you had her, you had Jay and Silent Bob, where Dino and Ginny don't even know who Jay and Silent Bob are.
They just like popped out of nowhere.
Mhm.
in the movie.
But yeah, I think, and it's their cameo is so like so fast and funny. You know, it doesn't even impact the movie at all. But what is crazy to me is that at the end, when they're in the mansion and Parker Posey dies, she's on the opposite side of one-way mirrors. And that one-way mirror is obviously in like a woman's bedroom, and it's in the creepy producer's house. And I
Yeah.
can't help but think that Bob and Harvey Weinstein both produced this movie. As like, who thinks of it of like putting a one-way mirror in a woman's bedroom? Oh, people who actually would put a one-way mirror in a woman's bedroom.
Hey, that's a good point, actually. I didn't
But
even think about
I feel like the movie is making like you keep bringing that up, and I feel like the movie is like making fun of like lambasting those type of people more than like, oh, Harvey Weinstein's like, let's show what my life is like.
What a perfect cover!
Oh my god. No, I mean, I like first of all, like the John Milton character isn't him, like isn't Harvey Weinstein because the guy's a director, right? But it is making fun of like not making fun of. I don't even know what the commentary is, but it is bringing to light like the using. It's just using as a story arc.
Yeah,
You know that
yes.
women had to sleep for parts.
Mhm.
Well, what's funny too, it's like for the Angeline character, she apparently won this opportunity to play Sydney in this movie. And then everyone was like, oh, she's not so innocent. She probably slept with the director to get this part, right? And then it's revealed later on, and she plays this like very innocent, sweet girl, right? And then it's revealed later on that she slept with Milton to get the part. There was no winning anything.
Well, also too, she plays an innocent person, but that character breaks a lot to where she's just like when she's in the house with Roman at the end, she like her character's kind of changed and she's like more kind of freewheeling and wild, which
Well,
is
when everyone starts dying, she's like, and Gail and Parker want her to follow them out of the. She's like, "Fuck this! People are dying. I'm out. I didn't come to Hollywood and sleep with Milton just to die." You know, and so yeah.
well, and I guess Emily Mortimer too thought that she was going to be a killer, so she acted that way for most of the movie. So when she found out that that part had been cut, she was kind of like, "Oh well, that's like not the way I was playing it." So
She
So-
was even like she had the ghost face stuff in the bathroom, like in the second
Yeah.
one too.
I
well,
think
yeah,
that
and
was later on.
she's wearing the same boots that Ghostface wears that we see in the beginning.
Yeah.
So I mean, like that part was cool because that's also the scene from the first one where Billy is in the
Oh,
bathroom.
Billy, yeah,
Mhm.
not the second one. You're right, Billy. Yeah, but honestly, though, they're Doc Martens, and it's 2000. So who didn't have a pair of Doc Martens in 2000?
That's fair.
Or
So-
right now. honestly.
Or now, exactly. We could all be the killer. Okay.
Oh,
True.
no.
I think
So
the real killer is the friends we met along the way. You know.
Dun, dun. So we next get the scene where they go to Milton and accuse him. I love when she's like, who, you know, they're asking him, and he's like, "How do I know some actress?" Da, da, da. And he's like, "Who said she was an actress?" And then Parker Posey yells at him, and she's like, "Easy, Geraldo." Like the lines between them are pretty funny because also you have Parker Posey like thinking she's a reporter now, like trying to play a reporter. It's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
really
That's
good.
funny.
Well, when they go see Carrie Fisher, and then um, Courtney Cox gets all up in that dude's face. He's like, "All right, chill, Lois Lane."
Yeah, that was funny because you were like, Courtney Cox would play a good Lois Lane.
I said
And
that
then he
right
called her
before.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, right before she's called Lois Lane, I was like, "Oh, if a Superman movie was made in like the early 2000s, Courtney Cox would have been a killer Lois Lane."
Is this the time to talk about her hair in this movie?
I
The
think that's
perfect
why
time.
the ratings were so low.
As soon as she showed up on screen, Dino threw up.
So I guess those are fake, and she like
The bangs?
yeah,
The
the bangs
bangs
are
are fake?
fake. And she
What?
said that like they only had one pair, and that like when they put them on, the person cut them horribly. And there's like a quote from Nev Campbell where she was like, "I was trying to be supportive," and I was like, "Oh no, they look great."
Bruh.
But I like before I saw this movie a couple weeks ago, I saw like a meme. It was just an Instagram video, making fun of bad haircuts in movies, and that one was on there, and I was like, oh my gosh, like why is that? Like who thought
It
that was a good idea?
it almost looked like it wasn't David Arquette that stuck the fork in the light socket. It was Courtney Cox that stuck the fork in the light socket. Also, we were always reminded of her good hairstyle in the previous movies because that's how Parker Posey wore it the entire film.
Yeah. So Sydney's at the police station, and Detective Kincaid's like, I'm gonna leave. So Detective Patrick Dempsey showing up in the end of this movie was the producer's like idea, because they're like, why the fuck has he not been in the last 45 minutes of this movie? He was just not supposed to show up for the rest of the movie.
Really?
Which
Well, you could see that in the alternate ending since he wasn't there.
Yeah. So he leaves, and then we get a call. Dewey gets a call from Sydney, but we know as the audience it's fake because she's like, I'm with the detective right now. We're heading over to Milton's. And we know that the detective left. So we know that they're going into a trap. And so then they get there. They find what they use Star 69, or they use like the caller ID, and they find the mask. So then they start looking for people
with the voice changer. They find the
with the voice
mask with the
changer.
voice changer. And then finally, the general cast is aware of the voice changer. So I don't know. I think it was a real weird choice to like make the voice changer not known for so late, because the audience knew of a voice changer the entire time.
Mm-hmm.
Well, because they kept using it, right? Like it's kind of a crutch. That's why the characters didn't find out about it until the very end, because the movie kept using it as a crutch to keep the plot going along.
I don't think like in real life there's actually a voice changer that good.
Yeah, not even to this day.
I will say that it almost sounded, instead of a voice, it was a voice changer, but it almost sounded as if it was just a recording.
Right. Which is what I thought at first, until they were like,
because when Sydney calls Dewey, the fake Sydney, she's like, hey, yeah, I'm going to this party. And he's like, okay, but what about this? She's like, see you there, Dewey, thanks. And it just like ends it. And it was like, oh, I didn't have a line for your comeback. So I just had to say like, oh, we're done. Yeah. Like True Lies.
Yeah, like True Lies. Yeah.
So we're in the final scene, which, by the way, this house apparently was used in Halloween H2O. So we'll get to see it again, Alon, in like 4 years.
3
years.
3 years. Yeah.
Roman goes off with Parker, which makes you think that those are the two killers looking for the screening room. They end up going downstairs. Dewey, we already said Dewey uses the caller ID. So Gail finds Roman dead, and then she checks his pulse. And that was like a big plot hole for a lot of people. Like, well, she checked his pulse, and the Wes Craven was like, well, there's ways to fake that. It was like, it's not explained. And also like how Parker Posey, if Roman just killed himself, like, why is Parker Posey hiding and scared?
I was literally thinking about that too, because I'm like, it makes so much more sense for her to go down there, kill him, stab him, and hide, and then be like, oh my gosh, he was here.
Or fake his death.
Right. Where it doesn't make sense for her to. I mean, I guess if Roman quickly stabs himself, gets in the thing, and we don't see her freak out, come down. Roman, are you there? And then she finds him there. Then maybe she reacts by just hiding in the curtain until someone else. But I feel like that just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, something doesn't sit right here, because even if Courtney Cox is about to check Roman's pulse, and then Parker Posey comes out and deters her away from checking his pulse, then it could have been, oh, okay, he faked it, he could never, right? So, but the fact that she checks his pulse, and isn't Roman the only death that happens off screen to us, the audience? We've seen everyone die from Ghostface, except Roman. Roman is the only one that we don't see, and it's because it's fake.
Well, we technically don't see the guy blow up.
Oh, we do.
We somewhat do.
We do.
We don't see Tyson die. We hear him die.
Yeah.
Because he gets thrown off a balcony. We don't see him hit because
but we see his body later.
But okay, we saw Roman's body later, but it was fake.
I guess we don't see him actually hit the ground.
It's not Tyson. Okay.
Well, no, yeah, he's definitely dead.
know.
So Angelina says says I did not fuck that pig Milton to die here with second-rate celebrities as she runs off. She gets stabbed sort of off screen and then dragged away. They all run, and then Ghostface, who I guess is just a fucking badass, attacks 4 people in a bedroom and just like crushes them all. Like stabs Tyson, gets Parker Posey to hide, which ends up being her demise because Tyson runs off saying he's going to call the cops, so then he gets killed. And then Roman, I guess, knows his way around this house, so he finds Parker Posey, and killing her through the glass was a cool death. Like as Dewey's shooting the glass out.
Very reminiscent of how Dewey dies in the music studio in the second one,
Mm-hmm.
or Dewey almost dying in the music
like,
studio.
what?
Yeah.
Wait, what?
Almost dying as like Courtney Cox is witnessing in the soundproof booth. But what's reverse of here is like we see from Parker Posey's angle like David Arquette and Courtney Cox, but they can only see their reflection, so they have no idea what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so Gail gets grabbed by Ghostface a little later on, and they fall down the stairs, and Ghostface kind of gets knocked out. And I was like, that's very reminiscent of when Ghostface got knocked out in the car.
Yeah.
And Sydney had to like crawl over him. And then Ghostface calls Sydney, and
oh wait. What I didn't want you to walk away from the scene without mentioning is Ghostface throws his knife at Dewey, and we think it's gonna like fucking impale him and kill him in his skull, and it hits him in the hilt, and then just knocks him out, which I think is hilarious.
It's such a Dewey way to get knocked out. So Ghostface calls Sydney. She steals some car keys and she grabs a gun, and she gets to the mansion, and he makes her use a metal detector. And I was like, man, she should have grabbed 2 guns.
Yeah.
And then that was such a great reveal. Because I think every movie, especially 2 and 3, you forget that she's kind of a badass in the end of these movies always.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So like she pulls out the second gun, shoots him, he disappears. He tries to stab her again, and she's just like, all right, motherfucker, come get me. Like, let's do this. And we already sort of talked about Detective Kincaid coming in and her thinking that it's him. But then, now we're at the final act. The Scooby-Doo mask is removed, and we figure out that it is Roman.
I do want to mention when Roman comes out and reveals himself, he's wearing the corner bloody thing from where I thought that she was having another dream about her mom.
Mm-hmm.
But how is Roman so in tune with her psyche, knowing like she's dreaming about her dead mom, and then Roman is gonna like pretend to be the dead mom?
That's true. That's why I was like, was that a hallucination or?
It was kind of weird that
I know it was.
Yeah. It was weird that she was dreaming of her mom being outside, like not just by the window, but her mom like walking. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, that was creepy.
Roman hired an actress, had her makeup done, and then
Literally. Except he didn't know where she lived. So, but yeah, I think the movie does like kind of play with like, oh, is this a dream or is this something? Because I think when she's on the set, he's definitely faking the mom's voice. Although, how does he know? Like, how does he get her voice? Well, how does he get her voice? I mean, he did go to her at one point, and she was like, "No, I'm not going to be your mom."
What kind of voice changer has the settings? Like, how would you even do those settings? Where it's like you copy the tone and cadence of someone's speaking voice, and then whatever you say into it, it just does it that way.
It's really only available now with artificial intelligence. I feel like you can do that now, but the idea of doing that is just bonkers before last year.
Maybe because he's in the movie world, he has access to more expensive gadgets like that.
Yeah.
Maybe like
it seemed like they were throwing in a science fiction element in this like kind of grounded story.
Yeah. That's fair.
So Roman, we have a big fight. he's choking her to death until Kincaid walks in. And then she pulls the knife on him, and he's like, well, I found something better. And she shoots him. And you were talking earlier about how the alternate ending shows that from Sydney's perspective, her hunting Roman. But I think
Yeah.
like the movie always shows the perspective of the person being hunted. So I like the continuity of that, of now Roman's being the one who's being hunted. And then the Star 69 thing, and she stabs him. And then she holds his hand as he's dying. I love when I forget who says it. It was either Gail or Dewey. Like, it was Roman, and I was just thinking, like, yep, Scooby Doo, it was Roman this whole time in the mask. And then he gets up, and she's like, "Head, Dewey, head, shoot him in the head."
He's like, what?
Yeah, just like how Mikey gets up in the last one, and then I think Billy gets up in the first one after being
And then the movie ends with a proposal, and I think that part's lame. Like, I don't know, bad acting, bad dialogue, whatever. I like Sydney coming in, opening the gate, leaving it open, not putting the code on, like finally just being like, all right, this is over, which it was until, they decided they needed to make more money.
Right.
Are they dating now, Sydney and Kincaid?
I think so.
Is that why he's like, I have a movie on? She's like, what kind of movie? And then cut to black.
It's your mom's porno, Sydney.
What?
That'd be insane too, right? Like if it was like, oh, it's a horror movie. Like, no. No.
Yeah. Something I thought that was cool too. I think Alon pointed it out that Sydney had her college boyfriend's necklace on.
Yep.
The whole time, and that's what she used as a weapon
In the second one.
For the second one. So I was like expecting that to like happen.
Come back into play.
Yeah, come back. But
yeah, she's carrying it around as a just in case sort of thing. Yeah. So, David, before we give our final thoughts, you have alt castings.
Yeah, I have a ton. There's also some other fun facts, but I'll just do the castings because it's a lot. So, the Carrie Fisher part was offered to Jamie Lee Curtis.
Oh.
She turned it down, which would have been really funny. Although I think Carrie Fisher's great. And then I guess Heather Locklear was considered. John Milton, Wes Craven considered doing it himself, and also considered Christopher Walken.
Oh my gosh, that'd been funny.
And then it's basically just like, hey, what WB actor can be in this movie right now? So David Boreanaz from Angel was considered for Detective Kincaid.
Oh, that would have been good.
Christine, who is Cotton's girlfriend in the beginning of this movie, has the most considereds. So
she ended up being played by someone from Gossip Girl.
Yeah, and it was such a small part.
Well, that's what this movie does, though, because so many people I think liked this franchise in the beginning, that they're just like, oh, I'll do a bit part and make a little bit of money and just be a part of this franchise. So, and I don't know whether these people were considered, offered, whatever. Kate Winslet for Christine. Kate Winslet, Shannon Doherty, Charisma Carpenter, Liv Tyler, Jennifer Connelly, Alicia Silverstone, Kerry Russell, Alyssa Milano, and Denise Richards.
Wow. If Alyssa Milano took the part, you were one person away from having the three Charmed girls.
Well, Shannon Doherty's the other one, right?
Is she?
Yeah.
Okay.
So either way, you're trying to knock out two. Tom Prince, Paul Walker, Josh Hartnett, James Vanderbeek.
For who?
Tom Prince.
Who's the guy who plays Dewey in the
yeah.
Stab 3. Okay.
Whoa, I would have loved Josh Hartnett.
I think any of those. James Vanderbeek would have been really funny.
He would have been hilarious because it's him.
Yeah. Jennifer Jolie, who is the Parker Posey part. Selma Blair and Terry Hatcher. Terry Hatcher would have been really good.
I was thinking Selma Blair would have been amazing.
They both would have been good. For Roman, Benicio del Toro. And then for Sarah, Tara Reid.
I'm sorry, wait. So for the killer, it would have been Benicio del Toro?
Well, I mean, the killer wasn't decided until last minute, so he just would have been the director.
Until he was the killer.
I mean, if you have Benicio del Toro in the movie, you almost can't make him the killer.
That's true. It's too obvious.
For Sarah, which is the Jenny McCartney part, Tara Reid, Monica, and Ali Larder, which I think all work.
Yeah.
Monica would have been different, obviously. Yeah, that's it.
What about? Oh no, you said Stone Cold Steve Austin for Patrick Warburton's role,
Yeah.
right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. That would have been the best one. Although Stone Cold Steve Austin can't die, so like,
Yeah.
yeah, he's kicking the shit out of Ghostface.
Literally.
I do like how Patrick Warburton like kind of gets the best of him a little bit. Like,
Yeah.
he gets stabbed and he turns around and like throws him up against the thing because it's like that's the way it would go.
Mhm.
I think this movie is a pretty good conclusion to the franchise. I will say one like defect in these movies, the way they do them, is not knowing how it's going to end until the last minute. And so then like it just kind of, it feels like, oh, so you're just like, you wanted to make us think it could be anybody and not reveal who it was. And then, you know, you have this Angelina character who really, I mean, there's one point where Tom Prince says, I think the killer's Sidney Prescott. So it's like laying the foundation, like, oh, it's the girl playing Sidney Prescott. But overall, like, still really enjoyable. And yeah, like a really good ending to the series until it starts back up.
We'll see how they figure out a new plot.
Yeah.
1 year from now.
1 year,
Yeah.
we'll find out. I really enjoyed it too. Like we were kind of talking on the way. I'm like, I think I liked it and enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed Scream 2. I think upon reflecting, I feel like there was a lot more loopholes and plot points that made me be like, it doesn't make sense, but I enjoyed it as a whole watching the movie. Like it did, I feel like what it was supposed to do, which was give me some jump scares, make me laugh, kind of conclude with just like this very, I don't know, whodunit reveal. It just kind of, I don't know. It was an enjoyable watch. I enjoyed it.
And Dino really did have a jump scare. So
Yes.
I can attest to that.
Courtney Cox's hair.
Yes. Oh gosh. Although I will say, the one moment I had to stand up out of my chair was just when we saw the mom. I was just like, I can't do this.
That was creepy.
I cannot do this mom showing up. It's not. Don't do well with that stuff.
The thing for me is that I really like the movie, and what's strange too is like looking at the rankings, how Rotten Tomato has ranked them. The highest one being Scream 2, actually, at a 82% on Rotten Tomatoes, and then the second lowest one, which is Scream 4, is at a 75% on Rotten Tomatoes. David, the drop between Scream 4 and Scream 3 being the lowest one is 41% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah, people don't really like this one.
People don't really like this one. I didn't have a problem with it. The only thing that I could see an issue with, that I had an issue with, is that throwing the I'm your half brother plot line in there kind of felt shoehorned in. But apart from that, I really enjoyed it. And I think these movies aren't too focused on A, scaring you, and B, being taken very seriously. I think it's like it just wants to make sure that its audience is having like a fun time watching this.
Mhm.
And I think it did that for us. So
Yeah, and it gives us hope for watching the future movies if they're rated highly. If we like this one.
higher than this, yeah.
Yeah,
higher than
honestly.
this one.
Well, thanks for listening to another episode of I Finally Watched. This is David.
And this is Alon.
And Dino.
And Jenny.
And we
finally
watched
Scream 3.
That was better than I thought it was going to be.